I think it's super interesting when people think about AI with like large language models and they think it's going to take over like everyone's job. I think a lot of people are overestimating what's happening in the short term or what will happen and maybe underestimating the long term.
Right. I feel like the latitude we gave ourselves, and most startups do the same, the first few years and how we were operating has changed dramatically.
Okay, welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm here with myself, David.
I'm Reid.
And Reid, and
I'm Nicole.
Hey, Nicole. Thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So, Reid, I think you were mentioning in Roundup this morning, this has become a bit of tradition for us to do a recap of the year.
Yeah. I mean, I think at least 3 years in a row. When did we launch the podcast?
I think that was at the end of 19.
Yeah. So this might be our fourth version of this, but I'm
Might
pretty
be.
confident it's at least our third.
Yeah.
Definitely at least our third, because I remember us all crammed around the round table that's in this room. And then I remember us doing one here.
Yeah.
So I think this is number 3.
Yeah. And in the first year, I don't know how much sense it would have made for us to do a recap, like starting off
We
Yeah.
survived.
the podcast.
That's the
Yeah.
recap.
Well, quite literally, because I think that was pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Our fir-
2020,
Yeah. Well, anyway, so now we're back. I feel ill prepared for this one, but Reid said you say wing it? No, you didn't say wing it. What'd you say?
I just said let it rip.
Let it rip.
Yeah.
So we're letting it rip.
Yeah.
So the way I guess this has gone in the past is
When you say you feel ill prepared, when have you felt prepared for a podcast?
usually I'm prepared in the emotional sense that I'm just ready
Okay.
to do it.
Okay.
But not because I've
Done
studied
your
up
homework?
or written any sort of notes.
I was gonna say.
So anyways, I guess like Erica has us starting off with the highs and the wins, or is that where you guys want to kick off
Sure.
for
Yeah.
23?
Yeah.
Well, what do you got?
Well, I have a handful of things written down. I think she wanted us to do top 3, but we're definitely going to have more than 3. So I'll start off personally, because she said personally for the business, but 2023 being a huge year for me, returning from maternity leave. That was a huge win. And when I was reflecting back, I was like, was that 22 or 23? Because it feels like it's been forever, but it was just February 6th of 2023. So wild that all happened this year.
Yeah, job well done. I guess you could say I came back too, but I think
You
I came
did.
back on the first. So
Yeah, I think.
I don't think you went through quite as much as Nicole.
how dare you? You don't know what my experience is like.
Well,
I've done it 3 times in my own way.
Well, not just from that, like, female versus male, but coming back and having a new role. So right before I left, I hired Karina, who's the director of client services. Her and I had about 5 weeks together before I went out on maternity leave. I came back February 6th, so really officially kind of handed off the department over this last year. So definitely a big year of growth for the company, client services, but also for me stepping into more of a higher level company role with employee experience, which was my next win, but I'll let you guys jump in first.
Well, maybe it's also helpful to level set for those that are new listeners. But Digible, we started in 2017 with the 3 of us, and last year, or I guess this year, over this past year, we now have hit just right at 100 employees, or just above.
We're above, yeah.
Yeah, and about half of that was this over the last 12 months. So I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that we had up on our annual slides the other day. We hired more than 40 something people this year. So it was a really big year for change for Digible and continued growth. And from a percentage standpoint, it's not quite our top year, but it's near there. And it's from a relative standpoint, it's for sure like bigger than any other prior year. So there's just been a lot of change, and in a good way. And the company has adapted well to that. I think one of the other things, Reid, you pointed out that I think you said we added 2 new departments this year.
4.
See, I was thinking 4, and I was like, that feels like a stretch. So adding 4 departments.
It was
is
experience, marketing, operations, and product. I mean, Lurch was just transitioning from chief data officer, if you remember, and then Victor. So that was all meant for January. Marketing, we brought Olivia on in February. Product, we brought Alex on 120 days ago. And then experience was when Nicole came back. We hadn't even hired Courtney yet. So that's 4 departments.
Yeah. So I'm very pleased with how we've survived the year. I think if you would have told me that all at annual planning last year, it would have felt like a lot. like, oh man, can we really get this done? It's that weird thing that we have, right? Where it's like our appetites are really big, but then, and you're like, why can't we fit all these, wonderful things we want to do into our annual plan? It's like, but then when you actually get to the end of the year, you realize how much ground you actually covered. And when I look back on it and I think about how much it was and how exhausting it was, if you would have told me that at the beginning, it would have felt like a lot to do. So,
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's a reflection, meaning those 4 departments and a lot of things this year of what's required. When I say required, and that's actually the wrong word. And that's where I'm proud, like, of the fact that we kept investing
mhm,
and that, as lean as we ran the company for the first few years, and as a bootstrap company, you have to survive. As we saw opportunity and need to invest back in the business, we moved forward with it in 2024, or sorry, 2023. And that's just been really great. Like, using employee experience, I know how valuable it's been for, well, not just employee experience, but for Nicole as she looks at that team. But to have Karina come in and take on the department, to have Courtney come on and take the department, to have pure recruiters, trying to help with those 40 hires has been huge. And not only have we brought on those resources, but we've actually improved our profitability in the process, which I think is a
mhm,
pretty amazing story. So adding more specialty, more focus, more accountability in key areas of the business, and still dramatically improving our cash flow, our profitability, our top line is a rare achievement. So
mhm.
you can give me the applause.
It's the only one we have labeled anymore.
Yeah, right, right. And when I say that, I give us the applause, but
Yeah.
that's a big high, because it's scary as a business owner, and you start to see all this stuff surface. It's like, man, we're growing like crazy, but now I got to spend all this money in all these places, and there's going
Yeah.
to be all this new faces and all this stuff. How are we going to do that? And yeah, we're still working through it, but generally speaking, I think we should celebrate, our position as a business right now, with all that change.
Mhm.
Totally. I think it's also an interesting mindset because with the 4 new departments and speaking specifically for employee experience, it's now I'm functioning in that startup mentality within the department, compared to the scalability and the stability that we've had on the client services side, in my example. And so it's been really cool and fun to have to like transition gears back to like, okay, we're now building the ship, we're building the team, we're building the processes, and then going back to okay, what have we had for the last almost 7 years, and what's not working? How do we make these small tweaks? But the pace is very different, and that can be super exciting.
Mhm.
Definitely.
It's also, I think, I was, sort of just trying to be very open and vulnerable on the how exhausting it would be when I look back. It's like if I knew what was coming this next year, I might say the same thing as far as like how exhausting it's going to be. But it is a very proud thing. Where I was wanting to go with that, building on what you said, Nicole, is what's been really challenging for me this past year is going from what felt more like that early stage company to this year. It actually felt more like a tougher transition for me into more of a mid stage or established organization where we are having things pop up that feel more corporate in nature, just to try to pick a very convenient word for it. And I was just like, we never had to deal with this before. Like, why does this matter? Like, it doesn't, like, my gut is like, I'm still stuck in the past, I guess, on the survival mentality and the like scrappiness mentality versus what any new employee coming on as employee number 101, you're going to have these certain expectations that you didn't have when you were employee number 4. Right. And that has just been, I don't know if jarring is it, but, very surprising for me, and I'm still adjusting to it, like, when some of these things pop up, and my immediate reaction is like, "We don't have to do that, like, we're not there yet." So, just being open.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like the latitude we gave ourselves, and most startups do the same, the first few years, and how we were operating uh, has changed dramatically. And the latitude that an employee has for us or with us as employers has changed. When you walk into a company that has 100 people, your expectations are very different of how that company is probably going to operate than if you join a startup of less than
Mhm,
10 people. I mean,
mhm,
we're pretty far away from that, but it did feel like this year, and I think you're right, it's about 40 employees, but we almost doubled the head count. And I felt that as much like, and what we're describing is just the simple fact that we were no longer in all the interviews, and we're still trying to make it. And you've always put a big emphasis on exposure, just so that they can hear our story and feel like there's not too big of a separation between founders and new employees. But yeah, I mean, at the party, which was on my highs list, that we had Thursday at the end of the year, there was at least 10 people that I couldn't have told you their name or what job they had. I
Really.
got to, I think, 8 out of those 10.
You know who my what my
But
secret was
it was
there?
weird.
I stood next to Kelly, and I was like, "Kelly, who's that?"
Yeah,
Kelly, who's
smart.
that? So Kelly, our recruiter, she knew everybody. I
Yeah,
was like, "You're
yeah,
incredible."
yeah,
Well, let me give one example just for the listeners on what I mean by that. So I felt like we've always been pretty buttoned up on process, framework. I feel like professionalism with clients and the way that we conduct our business. It was more on, as you were saying, Nicole, about launching employee experience. That it was more of the I don't want to offend Courtney with it, but again, I'm just going to try to use something that's easy for people to conceptualize, but more of what felt like red tape. So a good example for me with that is she came in and she's like, shoot, we allow dogs in the office every day, but we don't have a dog policy. And so we need to write a dog policy and have everyone acknowledge that they've received it. And I was like, well, what are you now saying we can't have dogs or whatever? She's like, no, no, no. I just want the company to be protected in case someone brings their dog, that dog bites someone, who's responsible. I was like, that makes total sense. But in the past, it didn't feel necessary for us to spend the time to write up a dog policy and have people acknowledge it. So just a really, I don't know, hopefully like good example for folks to conceptualize.
Totally. I mean, huge shout out to Courtney. So she joined May 8th, and the amount of structure that she's put in place, policies she has written, I feel like her superpower too is balancing the needs of the employees and wanting to deliver an exceptional employee experience with also protecting the company and seeing risk that the three of us as not having HR/legal type of backgrounds would have ever identified or have seen, and balancing that in a way where it doesn't feel just super gross, or it feels approachable and it feels understandable. Like even when she explains it to employees of like, hey, here's why we're doing this new policy, or here's why I'm doing this training, they're like, yep, totally get it. Like we're over 100 people. It makes sense. So huge shout out to her. She's been absolutely phenomenal.
And
yeah.
she wasn't she
Rising
employee?
star.
Oh,
She
Rising
was
Star.
Rising Star of the Year, and then also Employee Experience was Department of the Year. So she's crushing it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel so much more secure that she is here, but it's definitely, as I said, it just added sort of that layer that I'm talking about, which I think we're still managing well. So I think she's done a great job balancing it as you were describing. But it's still just a mind shift for me as I hear about these problems bubble up. So,
Yeah, and I think some of your examples were, well, I guess actually the last one was spot on. I was just going to say there's a lot more risk analysis and management and thought put into a business at this size than anything we had experienced before. So
hmm
whether it's the dogs or how we view contractors, things like that, those are all things that didn't really occupy our headspace
hmm
uh, until Courtney's arrival.
yeah,
So I love she plays that midfield, if you will. So you don't want somebody in that position thinking too much or calibrating too much to the employee
Mm-hmm.
or too much to the owners or founders. And I think she's found a really great balance.
yeah, and I'm excited to continue with her there because there's some obvious things that she's gotten to. But on what is Digible's like, at what point would we say we accept the risk? You and I read on a episode in the last, I don't know, 8 weeks, had a conversation about risk and how do you determine the ROI of like covering off for that risk. Um, but it's just top of mind for me to decide like what is our tolerance? Because if we had no tolerance, it would really feel like for risk, it would really feel like we slowed a lot of things down. So we still
Mhm.
want to be able to move quickly and not become this like behemoth that can't turn the ship, but while being responsible. And I just don't believe we have that well defined yet.
Yeah. So some other highs, or were you gonna continue that thread?
I was just gonna say there's some stuff that she does and her and I do together that I guess don't make it up that she is definitely like blocking and tackling
Mm,
for sure. And there's some risks that we've accepted, but we're like, okay, cool, we're gonna figure that out in January of 25, and that's okay. So I think
mm-hmm,
that that's also great of like what occupies our headspace, as you
mm.
guys were mentioning earlier.
Well, I mean, it's great because the whole point of having someone there is also for it not to occupy our headspace, right?
Yeah,
And with her, I do have that confidence that like someone's on it, so like I don't need to think about that anymore.
totally. Well, what I had next, which I'm sure we all had, was just all of the accolades and awards. So Denver Post top workplaces, Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies, and then the new one recently, which we just posted about, was we ranked number 8 for multifamily best places to work, and then also multifamily best places to work for women. So huge year for awards. And did I miss any?
Adweek,
Adweek.
fastest growing agencies. I think that's
Yeah,
it.
I think we've always felt a little weird about that because one of our core values is humility, and so we don't like beating our chest or flashing like awards and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But you see how much pride, and it makes me feel good seeing our employees when those kinds of awards get announced. Like it's important to them, which makes it important to us. So yeah, they're badges of achievement, but I try not to get too caught up in how many of those we take home.
Did
But
we also get the award for longest place Reid has been employed?
well, wouldn't that be all three of us at
Yeah.
this point?
I stayed a little bit longer at Verizon, so
You
I'm not
didn't
quite there.
stay
I think I was 8
7?
years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
I Tell me about it.
Yeah.
I almost don't want to think about like do
How
that
did you
retro.
survive that for
Yeah.
8 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Well, yeah, I think we passed that for me a long time ago.
Yeah.
'Cause I think it was only 3.5 years.
Well, what else you got, Reid?
Well, I was just trying to put down some examples because there's quite a few, but one of the things we did back in 2020 when we brought people, or maybe it was 2021, was that thought experiment 2050.
Yeah.
And we challenged all the departments to think about what their jobs would look like 30 years from now. And it really was not to throw, I guess, water on, but just say, hey, with all the automation and the change that's happening, there's a good chance that the work you're doing, the role you're in, either may not exist or will dramatically change. And so the follow up to that was like, what kind of skill sets could you guys start developing now to prepare for that? Because we want to be a company that is leading that change, not reacting or kind of casualties of that change. And so for me, 2024 had several kind of, I guess, achievements, milestones where we're demonstrating being more causing or part of that change than on the other side of that, and that trickles down to our employees where it's like, so do we, are there examples of new positions at Digible or lateral movement for the better, I'll say, and there's quite a few of those that we saw, and it didn't all happen in 24, but whether we think about Megan as a delivery manager, Adam as a marketing automations engineer, Alex Greenman just recently now moving over to business analyst. And there's plenty within the other orgs, the larger orgs, that there's been some evolutions or changes in skill set and roles. I think I had told you guys this year we lit up, I want to say it was 13 new positions. So 4 new departments, but 13 new roles. And that's just, for me, super exciting, as I reflect back a couple of years ago and kind of telling our company then that this is what we wanted our story to turn out to be. And I feel like we're headed that direction.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I'll share this little anecdote about your automation.
Erica was another. Sorry.
Oh yeah, she
Yeah.
switched over. Yeah. So when people think about AI with like large language models and they think it's going to take over like everyone's job, I think I think a lot of people are overestimating what's happening in the short term or what will happen, and maybe underestimating the long term. However, as you were talking about, like the midfielder or what have you, there's this middle game. So where I'm going with that is we are still hiring, plenty of people that need the right copy and do different things of that nature, even though, AI, for
Can
writing's
do
the
most
thing,
of it. Yeah.
right? Um, Yet, well, where I'm going is I think a lot of people have this fear built up that it's going to take their job. I remember when we first started with Fiona, everyone was like, a lot of marketers often would tell us, shoot, this is going to take my job. I'm so terrified. I do think people adapt a lot. But the thing that struck me this weekend is when we were grocery shopping, I was standing there waiting on Nicole was looking at the flowers. So I was there with Griffin. I had him in the backpack or in the hiking backpack to go through the grocery store because he's better that way. Anyways, so he and I are chilling by the self checkout, and I'm looking at self checkout. I'm like, I saw the first self-checkout when I think I was in ninth grade, so 1999, and everyone thought that self-checkout either everyone's gonna steal or it is gonna take everyone's job, but most of the people were going into the regular line and avoiding self-checkout, and I'm like, "That was 1999. We're more than 20 years later, and you still have both." Right? And so I'm just making that point, taking the opportunity because it really sunk in that it's been more than 2 decades, and yet it's self-checkout's not everything. And I think the same thing's gonna happen whether it's AI automation, Experiment 2050, or whatever, copywriting. So I just think the transition's gonna take a while.
I think also our employees are starting to see that more as a positive with the 13 new positions that you mentioned and thinking, okay, how could my career evolve because of this versus that fear? I mean, sometimes we think maybe we have too much of that, of
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
pitching new positions or new departments, things like that. But I think in general, it has opened up people's minds to think through how it could be different, which has been exciting to be part of those conversations and see that dialogue back and forth versus just the reactivity or the reactive nature that it could force into that
Mhm.
culture for sure.
I have to do this since I'm stuck on self-checkout. Do you guys remember the first thing you bought at a self-checkout?
The first thing I bought,
That's a big no.
yeah.
Mine was very memorable, one, because I was, like, blown away when I saw self-checkout, but it was at our old Walmart in the Colony, Texas. Like, it was old, and they were replacing it with a new Walmart. So this Walmart was going out of business, and everything was on major discount. And I remember specifically because this is the first time I was using self-checkout at the old Walmart. Why did they install it when they were building a new Walmart? And I bought 30 Wheaties boxes because the Wheaties boxes were 10 cents each because they were just trying to get rid of these Wheaties boxes. And so I spent whatever, like $3 buying these Wheaties boxes through a self-checkout. And I was like, could I have just like skipped one of these Wheaties boxes? Would they even know? Blah, blah, blah. I ate Wheaties
I was
for,
gonna say,
I
what
had,
did you do with all those?
I had it for some time. I couldn't tell you it was some baseball player on the front, but I don't know who it was. So
I could never get
Wow.
into Wheaties. They get soggy too fast.
I didn't even like Wheaties. I
I was
just was
gonna
blown away by the
say.
10 cents a box.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. All right. Well, next topic. She has lows, unless you guys have other highs or challenges.
I definitely have other highs.
Okay,
yeah, so do I.
hit it.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I mean, my next one was Digital Summit in person. So Reid's brainchild really coming to life back in person. The last time we did it in person was 2019. And so this event, I think, really hit home for me. I know it was after the Q3 meeting I was texting you guys, but I think maybe after the summit too, of just the reflection that it invoked in me to just see everyone in person, see some of our key clients, the panel that we put together. It was a great mix of like thought leadership, but also participation from clients, vendors, partners, and just the feedback that we got was incredible. That it was such a intimate event where we can foster like genuine connections, relationships, the experiential aspects that Olivia and team put together with the putt
Mhm,
shack
mhm.
event. So I just thought it was such a cool moment to like be in person with everyone again and just reflect back because we had done it virtual for 3 years.
Something like that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because this was the fifth one. So
Yeah.
that was definitely a high.
Yeah, it was great, and you didn't mention Cindy, but I know you and her connected
Yes.
afterwards as well. This is the first time we paid for a keynote.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done some small stuff, but, she was amazing. She was on the Today Show, I think, right before she came to the summit, but talking about micro joys and, being showing up, as your true version of yourself. Some of this stuff may sound a little cliche, or at least that's how I feel about it, and until you meet somebody like Cindy that is really living it, had such a great kind of story behind her, and man, should she inspire, everybody in the room. She was awesome.
She lit up the room, yeah, so she did a session on personal leadership,
Mhm,
bringing your true self to work, and I feel like her magic was getting people to say things that normally go unsaid and
mhm,
being vulnerable, and I feel like that was day 1, so I feel like that set the tone for the rest of the day
mhm,
and a half to follow.
for sure.
One thing that I think she helped exhibit with that read was when you say bring your true self, when she got up there to speak, I was like, huh, is she wearing pajamas? And then I was like, nah, there's no way she's wearing pajamas to this keynote, this paid keynote gig. And then she's like a third of the way through the presentation. And I was like, it's stylish, like what she's got going on here. She's from New York, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, "Yeah, so that it's different in New York." And then she's like, "And these are Target pajamas." And I was like, "Oh, shoot, they were pajamas." But I had then started to think that they were like, "This is some high fashion I don't know about now, and I accept." So I think it really demonstrated to me, like, if you just own something, it becomes okay. So, be your true self and own it.
Yep, totally. Well, from the summit to the Digi Awards, that was Thursday night, so it's fresh. But I just couldn't believe it. I knew we had a big crowd, and with the plus ones, so most people listening to this probably have no idea what One Barrel is, but it's a wine and like I don't know, is it a wine and cheese
Like wine
bar?
and bistro.
Yeah, wine and
Mhm.
bistro across the street. Um, and yeah, we packed that thing in like sardines. But the vibe was incredible. I mean, just the electricity, the energy, the enthusiasm, the gratitude, having so many people from coming out of town. I look forward to this so much now. The summer when we do that, and then at the end of the year. Rock, who's like our superhuman data engineer, came from Slovenia. And then we had people from both coasts. We had some of our engineers from Latin America come up. And yeah, I just surveyed the room and I was like blown away by all the talent, but the diversity. And then thinking about all that we've accomplished, all those different departments and what these people are bringing to the table. And then culminates in this really fun, award ceremony where we do kind of the superfluous, but we've moved that more to tying to our core values. And I thought Erica and Lisa were spectacular. They have that locked in. I think everybody looks forward to now hearing them MC the event, and then culminating, of course, with the big four. Um, yeah, I left with a big smile on my face.
I
I,
had a goal to introduce myself to 5 people since I don't know everybody, and I think I got, like, 11 people. So I was quite proud of myself, but it just shows, like, how many people we don't know now, which we do try to get. I know on my calendar, I try to have one coffee chat with somebody that I don't know every week. But at some of the clip, I think Reid, you had quoted we hired 9 people in the last 2 weeks before the awards.
it was 12, I think, right,
I
Nicole?
again
Yeah,
didn't want to.
11 or 12.
I again didn't want to overcommit there. So 12 people in 2 weeks, and it's like so my calendar's I'm backed up. Like I need to,
Yeah.
if I'm going to keep up to ever make it around to the whole group. So
Well, maybe we'll hit this again later when it comes to like culture and how we're growing. But I think the Digi Awards was a great just reflection point of how much the team supports each other. So I said this on Isabel's most recent LinkedIn post. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but it's
The
amazing. It's
the
gonna make you
chant.
cry. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I read it.
she received Employee of the Year, but from the crowd chanting Isabel. And then we got that same response, I think, for Rock. I mean, everyone like
Yeah,
lit
yeah.
up for all of the recipients, but I just feel like being because where we were standing too, I was kind of like on the outskirts and like had a great view of like watching things happen. I was like, this feels so cool to
Mhm.
see how much people care about the people that work here. Like that truly, it's the company's purpose, but it's their purpose too. So that just really hit home for me.
It's a great point observation. I don't know if you guys have been there. I'm going to assume you have, but at some point in your career where you're at one of these types of awards or ceremonies, and you just hear like the golf clap.
Totally. Yeah. Everyone's like, how
You're
quickly
like,
can we get through this?
wow, do people not like that person, or yeah, or they just like wanting to get to the drinks or what? But it was just the opposite
Yeah.
for us. There's definitely a lot of cheering and rah-rahing going on each time somebody got even nominated, much less
Yes.
uh, awarded.
It was
so
awesome.
it's also super cool to see happen now as you're bigger because some of that connectivity you would think would start to dissipate as you get bigger. And I was gonna make a joke, Reid. I forget what it was, but there's something you announced sometime in the last like 2 years. It's more than a year ago, but where you even said to people like, "Is there any clapping for this like thing that we're doing for you? We think it's a good thing." And so to go from that, where it can feel like I don't know, we have like 30 people, and there's not as much energy tied to any one thing we're doing, to then having 100 people that are then more cheering for someone else versus something we're giving them.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's a real. I believe that is a real accomplishment.
Yeah,
All right. Well, are you guys out of your highlights?
not really, but I think we probably can shift.
Okay.
At this point, I hopefully hit hard enough, but I just love the position and trajectory we're on, where we can make just have a lot more options. And I don't know which book it was that maybe you referenced when you said that, uh, or who the quote was. It might have been Ben Horowitz or somebody, but it was just saying you'll operate the worst, or maybe he was even harsher, stupidest when
Yeah,
you have no
money.
money. Oh, I thought it was the flip.
I
Is
thought it
that
was when you had money that you operated stupidly.
it's probably been that both points have been made. I hope that for us, of course, as we build up some cash flow and some profits, that we'll be making the best decisions we've ever made. But at least we can make decisions,
Yeah.
whereas a lot of times you feel like your hand is forced. So that's probably my number one, is just like looking at us right now, moving into 24, feeling like we're really in control of our own destiny.
Yeah, for me, I guess, like, sort of to add to your point, I forget when it was this year, but at some point I came to you because I was like, "Hey, it just dawned on me that these are the good times,"
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's like, so let's try to appreciate them. Similar, I guess, like Nicole for us and Griffin, right? It's like it's the good times with him right now. It will get bad.
You tell
Hmm.
yourself that at 3 in the morning when he's
Yeah,
sleeping.
yeah, when he needs another bath at 3 in the morning because he messed himself.
Hmm.
So anyways, I'm with you. It is the good times, and I don't want to see that just fly by and not appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, Erica's next section for us to dive into was around reflecting on the growth, and specifically as the growth as it relates to company culture. And so she did have numbers. So we've hired 45 people this year. Within the next 2 weeks, we're expected to hire 2 more. So 47 people by the end of the year. How are we operating and thinking about that amount of growth and delivering an experience that does not feel like people are just a number? So I teed it up since I have some thoughts here. So I want you guys to go first.
Yeah, you already killed my joke because I was gonna say I just learned people's number and not their name.
Mm.
Womp
It's
womp.
obviously not true.
I feel like we need the opposite of the clapping, like the womp womp.
I do
Yeah,
have that
exactly.
somewhere here, but we took the sticky note
He's
off.
kept that
So
out of reach of me.
yeah.
I can't get to all his jokes.
Well, I feel like that's more you two, like that have really focused in on that.
Yeah, well, I think that's what she's saying. Is she has plenty of thoughts because she really owns that. But uh, so how have we managed? Is Erica saying we were effective there, or is she just leaving it even more
She
open
did
than?
not say. She did not say there
Yeah,
was complaints or anything like
yeah.
that. But yeah, I mean, I can start.
Well, I want to give you a huge shout out, and it's always a team effort. But obviously, that was one of the big things you were looking forward to in making that transition, was to really own the full experience, not just the customer experience. And I feel like you've done a tremendous job there, hired the right people, and done a great job of I guess promoting internally, like the collective support that's needed. What we expect from peer, to shadowing, to your direct hiring manager, but cross departmental, going and getting coffees, the whole donut thing that Courtney brought to the table. But tacos has already been there. But all I've heard from people that come on or have come on in 2024, and of course maybe they're shifting that narrative a little bit with me, but has been overwhelmingly positive, where they're just blown away by the onboarding, the structure, all the lessons. But more than anything, I'm still getting the same feedback I got from 3 or 4 years ago, which was everybody's so eager to help, so willing to help. And that just, yeah, fills my cup. It's just such a great story, and you should take a lot of pride in that, Nicole.
Yeah, that one's hard because I know, as we don't take credit like that. It's totally a team effort. Like there's the team that we have. I mean, outside of just the employee experience team, obviously they are shaping a lot of the experience for candidates and for onboarding and for generally like employee events and feedback surveys. But I think it's really the main thread in the theme is that we hire the right people and we hire to the core values. And I feel like as we bring in more of those folks, the culture is beyond us. Like, yes, there's stuff that we're doing from the top down in terms of like surveys and feedback and making sure folks are engaged and having super tight processes built out. But I really feel like the culture now for you to join as employee 110, 111 and not feel like a number is really based on the direct team you're working with, your direct manager, you having those core values to put yourself in positions to make connections. So whether it's coming in and launching a game night or launching a knitting club or like having that confidence in yourself to be like, here's what I'm going to bring to the table and here's how I'm going to connect with people. I feel like we've just seen that in all of these recent hires, and it's been super like I'm just getting chills talking about it because I feel like it's been really cool to see the values that people are coming in with and how those are additive to the culture.
Yeah, I think like my observation is it's more of the work that you guys and the rest of the team put into this in prior years, less like new initiatives that were picked up now. I mean, it's similar to what Reid, you and I have talked about with the different books we've read where they're like it doesn't seem like the most important thing to do to set your core values, but set them early, because if you grow to 100 or 200 people and then you try to get core values, you wouldn't have hired by those, and then therefore like they're aspirational and not authentic. And so I think it starts with like Reid, you putting out those core values in like the first 6 months, and ratifying them, if you will, like your budget, right? And then us, as you're saying, Nicole, as we go through the hiring process in future years, as well as getting dedicated recruiters, that they're now focused on that. So I think it's the culmination of a lot of that work, versus it's not like a bunch of new initiatives we had to take on. It's more like continue those initiatives.
I think that's why it's felt maybe somewhat organic the whole time, because it started with the three of us saying like, we don't want to feel like work sucks, because we
Yeah.
were coming from an environment that was very corporate and different, and we probably all dreaded, our drive in or getting into the office at certain points. And it's that simple notion of like, we want to be excited and fun and look forward to coming in and working every day. And I feel like, that was the catalyst for what it is
Mhm.
today.
Mhm.
I think I can't completely connect this to how we handled the growth, maintain the culture, but maybe more the back half of this does fit. I heard from more candidates by far this year that they were waiting or working towards getting a job at Digible. And I mean, just couldn't believe, but so excited to hear that, because that, you guys know, I've been really passionate about that, wanting Digital to be one of the hardest places to get a job in Colorado and eventually in the country. And I heard that from plenty of candidates where they're like, just was waiting for a job to finally, pop up for that specific position so that I could apply. Or I've applied for 4 different positions because I just want to be a part of this company. And that gives me my own chills, but just
Totally.
what a amazing culture we've built. And then when you do on board, it's kind of like putting on the pinstripes, in baseball with the Yankees. It's like, now I'm here. I'm part of Digital, and that comes with a certain expectation or standard. I don't want to be the person to somehow dilute, the talent or the energy or the passion, et cetera. Like, I just want to. I'm going to give a positive call out to Riley, but I think we are seeing that with her. She's a great example. And just the first few weeks, she just saw the talent level, the energy, and she was just bursting at the seams to get started and get the job.
Mhm.
And then the minute she started, she was like, go, 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 just want to make sure that I'm keeping up, which I think's
Mhm.
super cool.
I can't. I remember, Reid, you had always said, like, as you were just pointing out, and I think in prior episodes, someone could roll the tape, but you were like, could this be harder to get into than Stanford or Harvard? And then when I ran those numbers of review of applications that Kelly reviewed versus how many people we hired, it was a 0.3% acceptance rate. And I know that Kelly didn't have the chance to review every application that was submitted either. So I think that part's been achieved. But Nicole, I think that I'd love you to tell your most recent story of this to help really hammer the point home.
Are you talking about the babysitter?
Yeah, and I don't know if Reed's heard that story, so.
No, and I don't know if this was more of like, I guess, the brand awareness or the brand reach. So just last week for the Digi Awards, we had our nanny was sick, and so we were on this. It's called Summit Nannies here in Colorado. It's like a last minute babysitter site, and they just try to match you up with whoever's available. They do all the vetting, and so we had Lexi come to the house, and I was on the all hands call, and so I had like my digital t-shirt on. I like quickly like muted, got her set up, left, and then she texted me and she was like, "Hey, your husband looks really familiar, like from the photos in our house." And she's like, "I Googled him and I listened to the Digible Dudes and I know Digible and all this stuff." And that like totally, it was such a moment where I was like, wow, like, outside of multifamily in our world where I'm expecting to like people recognize the company, I was like, okay, this, the brand has such a wider reach than the three of us maybe know or like give it
Mhm.
credit for.
Mhm.
So it's just that was really cool for us to experience.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
mind-blowing. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what other thoughts you have on the topic, Nicole, about culture this year?
I think we hit it. I mean, I think there's some tactical stuff we're doing. Reid mentioned donuts and tacos, but culture amp. So it'll kind of lead to the next point of like professionalizing maybe the business and how we're thinking about that growth in 2024. But I think we're taking similar approaches there to the culture where we're doing some things as a leadership team top down to basically build the infrastructure for people to voice concerns, be their best self, give feedback, but then also leaning heavily into the grounds up approach. So I feel like between those two things, I'm just really excited to see how it comes together next year.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm on the lookout for, and you know this, Nicole, and I think it's planned for 2024 with Courtney that she'll quarterback this, but I really want to do the, I'll call it I audit or intrinsic motivation audit from Daniel Pink. But the bigger we get, the more I worry, maybe more about the autonomy, but even the purpose. And that's what's been so rewarding this year is to see how large we've gotten and that it still feels like we're an I organization. So just for context, Daniel Pink wrote a book called Drive about intrinsic motivation, and he said, the ultimate goal for any company or organization should be labeled as an I, meaning you have created an environment that drives intrinsic motivation, and your employees feel that they respond to that, versus extrinsic, which would be more about titles and pay, just to simplify it. But that it really distills down into three buckets, which is kind of their flow, their engagement, like are they doing work that challenges them, that they feel rewarded by, and then autonomy. So for the outcomes that we're looking for, how much freedom do we give them to get to that, which connects a little bit with the Who book too on that F, freedom, and then purpose. And so do they really feel like they're about something bigger, but that helps get them out of bed every day too? And at different points, I'm worried about different aspects of that trinity. But the autonomy, I think, is going to be the one that I'll be most vigilant about. And ironically, maybe least equipped to be vigilant about, meaning in that day to day that's happening out there as these departments grow and grow, do they still feel like they have that freedom to find different ways to get to those outcomes that we're pushing them on? Because you think scale, efficiency, and those machines start to form. And on one hand, that's powerful and that's great. But on the other, you could actually start compromising some of the autonomy that's so important to the kind of caliber talent that we want to bring to Digital. So I think that will be definitely something to look out for in 24.
Absolutely.
All right. So is it challenges? What are we hitting next?
The last bucket was just open, kind of what's next in 2024 and what does the next year look like?
Yeah, that's less reflection. That's not that we shouldn't go there as far
Mhm.
as what's ahead, but I don't think we really hit the lows.
I was wondering if she's purposely skipping it or if I'm just stuck on the
Yeah,
challenging.
yeah.
Like, what
I was wondering the
challenges
same
question?
thing. I was like, all right, Nicole, come on.
Well, I hit some of my
David's ready to
challenges.
jump in. His list is probably
I don't
a
even
lot.
have, as you know, I had one thing on my list here: self-checkout 1990s. So we hit that. I feel like I hit some of my challenges with the thing around like the more of what felt like the becoming more stepping into more of a professionalized, as I was deeming, corporate environment. Some of the like, overhead that comes with that. So that was that, and that's more again like a more of a personal, like emotional type of change for me versus like a problem, because I also think there's like like some great need there. But I do have one other fun story to share for sure. So there have been 3 points that I can recall in our history where one of you or both of you together bring me something. Um, and I'm like, why are we spending money on this? And the first time, I don't know that you guys know how much this hit me, because I think maybe I resisted telling you, but we were in that first like physical address office that we had where, Adam came in and we were all crammed into one like 10
Bird
by
Yeah, tight
15
Street.
room.
spaces.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you guys, I don't think Adam was there for this part. Like maybe this is right before he got there, but
Do you go on Pirate Flag?
no, 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 no.
Okay.
A box showed up, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And you guys are like, "We bought T-shirts," and I was like, "What? Why did we get T-shirts? We're not even like a company yet." And you guys were like, "It was $220 to get T-shirts." I was like, $220 we don't have. What are we doing buying t-shirts? And but I was like, all right, just let it go. It's only $200, but it felt like a big thing to me. The second time was Reid, when we, obviously, I think I told this before on the podcast, but when we were getting the other office space, and it was going from like $800 a month to $3,000 a month, and I was like, what the heck? And you were totally right about that one for sure. And then the third one was when we were getting the digital sign put up outside the office, and that was this year. So that's why I bring it up.
That was, yeah.
I think the price tag was like $30K or something.
Yeah, with installation, it was like 25. Yeah.
Okay. So I just remember thinking, like, is this the best way to spend 25 grand? But it's also one of the things that brings me such great joy when I see it. And I do think, like, it's back to employee experience in a way. Like, when they show up to just a gray brick building, and we did get stickers on the front door that say Digible. So
just on one door, actually.
On one door.
Out of 3.
Yeah, 1 out of 3. And so, like, there's something there where it doesn't feel real. But now when I was getting my hair cut across the street, and that woman was telling me about, like, oh yeah, we used to just sort of joke around, like, what could Digible be? Is it a dog daycare? And I was like,
because they see everyone walking with dogs.
and then the woman was like, yeah, but one of my customers, her son works there. And I was like, wait a second. So your mom, it's sort of like you with the babysitter, Nicole. It's like your mom or someone's mom gets the hair done across the street and is now telling other people about Digible and that her son works there. And so, anyways, and you can see the sign through the window at the salon. So, those were my 3 times I questioned why we're spending on this, I'm still really glad that we spent the money on the sign.
Glad to hear it.
I think all those seem very practical compared to some of the things that you have brought up. So why don't you share your most recent pitch to Reid and I on what you want to spend a couple
Which one are you
$1,000s
talking?
on?
The T-Rex, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
Okay. Well, this is still in my possible budget for 24, but I did want to buy a T-Rex skeleton. We have, meaning a fake wait, what's it called?
That was before I
sculpture.
brought in the Big Jack. You had already been
Yeah.
tinkering with the idea of a T-Rex.
Yeah. Well, it's basically a 2-story,
I
like,
think it's like 3-story.
yeah, I mean,
I
it
think
is.
that thing's about
Yeah,
30
that's-
feet.
I think you might be right. So I'm like, well, how can we use this space better? And then I got served an Etsy ad or something with the T-Rex, and I was like, maybe we need this. So that there's a chance that might happen in 24.
Yeah.
All right. So lows, challenges.
Well, I can start with the soft lows. I think just this is broad strokes, but the amount of problems that come with this growth being this size, and this has nothing to do, of course, with Courtney because she's been fantastic. But when you create an HR department,
Yeah.
in many ways, just be prepared to open the floodgates, because suddenly now there's an avenue, right? A platform. And that's by design, so you have to remind yourself of that. But I think there's a lot of things that get surfaced where, as an owner, it's like, really, but there's other things that absolutely you should hear about or know about. And so for me, that was a bit of a challenge this year. I knew it was coming. I've worked beside many HR departments over my career. But yeah, I can't say that I loved every aspect of that.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad we have it, and I think it's great, like, it's definitely a good thing, but you guys know where I'm coming at. It just, if you thought you had problems before and then you bring on an experienced /HR department, then you'll find out really you have way more problems.
Yeah, I think it was also like when I reflect back on it, like our expectations. Like I'm wondering if we could have set we didn't know. But I think going into it, I think a lot of the frustration that I experienced personally was like, oh, I didn't expect to be the 3 of us spending time on this, or I thought it was going to be seamless, or I didn't expect to have problems arise that we didn't know about, or just the reality of maybe thinking that people were telling us things that they weren't. But because we're founders, they're not going to say things directly to us. And that was a little bit of like the glass shattering perspective of like, okay, that's normal, but that is to occur when you bring on a team like that. So definitely relate to that one for sure.
Well, and I'll say that we have quite a few folks here at the company where this is their first position or first job, really, in a professional environment. And so we've not had an HR training, if you will, about like this is when you should use HR and this is when you should not. And so I think that can add to it where people are not sure when or when not to, and so they just leverage it, and then they're not exactly sure in like what words they should be using to communicate something that they are of concerned about, or what have you. And so when they're not careful with their language, it can make something seem way more serious than maybe they intended. So it's just a nice, as you guys are saying, a good learning, because I think that would be valuable to set that perspective. I mean, for myself, even if I go through my professional career, it's not like when I was at any of these large companies, I had a training either about when or when not to use HR. But some of those companies, I won't like blow up any of their spots. It felt often that HR was trying to hide from us, to be like, I don't want to be available to end up like accepting some of your gripes.
Mm,
And that's been very different here, where Courtney is very welcoming. Like, please approach me with
mhm,
anything you are concerned about. So.
Well, mine was on a similar vein, but I guess also general language just around scaling and refining our process. We did run into some mistakes, challenges. There was a lot of handoffs that happened with hiring 47 people, that we realized, okay, our documentation needs to be tighter. It needs to be clear what is expected, from each role. And then as we uncover maybe some of these things that are getting falling through the cracks or the ball is getting dropped, how do we quickly put fixes in place. So I had that both as a challenge, but also a win, because I do think we've learned a ton throughout that process of going in, patching things up, improving the process, improving expectations, improving communication. But definitely something, we spent some time uncovering this year.
Yeah, it was only recently that I joined that network of other agency owners, and their rule of thumb was for every 20% you grow as a service agency, you should expect your processes and systems to break. And with as much growth as we had this year, that means it would have broken. I believe it was like 3 times over, and so maybe it's more than that. Anyways, but so of course we're gonna have some friction and some things are gonna go wrong. But that helped calm me down a bit. Like when I'm like, why are we having this problem? When I'm thinking that, but emotionally, as you always say, Reid, to have context, be like, oh yeah, okay, this should now be expected. That has just really helped me, like, pull back, accept it, and be like, great, what's the most important thing to rework then right now?
yep. Yeah, and sticking with the context, I think when I was hearing, and this was even 2022, but some of the challenges that Nicole's referring to, with just our day-to-day business, which was unsettling for us. We weren't used to that, but was perspective. So it's like if we were running 300 campaigns last year and now we're running 1,000, um, how much should we expect just proportionally 3x the problems? So it's important for us, and it's becoming more important that people come to us immediately with some perspective or context so that we know what level, I'll say, to react, like how much we're going to have to manage our emotions, um, which I also think we've gotten way better at. Got a lot of perspective this year through some of those growing pains, that I thought was really valuable. But that was one of the things I was going to say was a bit of a low for me, and I know for all of us. But just to work so hard to get to this point, and then feel like there were some moments where we kind of took ourselves to the cliff, and yeah, that was scary. And it just was like, this can't go this way now, after all of this. So I was really proud of the way the team responded, obviously, in getting those things corrected, and not just seemingly short term, but seeing opportunities for long term improvements.
And maybe you can push back, Reid, but I think taking us to the cliff was maybe how we felt about it versus maybe
The
reality.
reality.
Right. Yeah. And I've felt that a lot too, because as we're saying with all the, Nicole, you mentioned all these handoffs of adding more than 40 people. That's also been with our own responsibility. So we're
Mhm.
used to being pretty in the weeds on a lot of things. And as we start to try to hand those things off in a, manageable manner to whoever is now taking X responsibility over, it still means we're somewhat involved in the weeds at the same time that there's way a way bigger field than there was before. And so it's like, okay, are there really a higher percentage of weeds or whatever, like issues now than there were before? Or is it just because I'm a little too close to it and then can feel like we have all these problems happening, but maybe it's it's just relative.
Yeah. Well, I think we're, starting to run a little bit long, which I
Yeah.
expected, but uh, in the spirit of, as always, the transparency, authenticity that we try to bring to this podcast, and I'm not going to wrap us up on a low note, but the low for me was our relationships. I think not taken to the cliff, but definitely, it
Taken
was
to the
one.
woodshed.
Yeah, okay. I'll roll with that. But yeah, it was just the hardest I think, it's been for us, and it seemed like that's counterintuitive, right? It's like, look at all the success we're having, and yet we went through some real challenges. And I think what I realized, as we were coming through it, was just how much of it was personal, meaning at the individual level, what David was going through, what I was experiencing, like both in personal and professional, as well as Nicole. And those weren't lining up, meaning it was making it really hard to relate because we were each experiencing different conflicts in our life, professionally, personally. And yeah, that was really turbulent. But I couldn't be more proud and grateful and inspired, frankly, by all the traction we've gotten, here in the last quarter, I'll say, and what it looks like in 2024. I just feel like we've come out of it so much stronger, which is what you hope for, whether it's your spouse or whether it's a good friend or somebody in the family. Is you hope, if you are going to deal with adversity, that you overcome it and become stronger as a result. And I think that's absolutely where we're at. I feel like I have an even deeper appreciation for you guys, relationship, and yeah, just feeling really good going into 24.
Yeah, well
Yeah.
said.
I'm glad you took it there because I think the highlight that came out of that is that we all three are doing some intense just personal development and learning and sharing about those experiences and investing in coaches and different strategies that we're then taking back to the group. And I feel like we're approaching it differently, but learning from each other throughout the process. And as tough as some of those moments were in 2023, I'm thankful for them because it has forced us to kind of really look inward. Like, we cannot be great leaders if we don't do work on ourselves first. So I'm excited for us to all continue on these journeys for sure.
Yeah, we've often operated under a leaders eat last kind of mentality, and so when we invest in the company, we're often investing in the employees first. So let's get them a coaching program or some sort of support for their own development, but then we don't earmark budget for the executive team to do the same, and that just wasn't maybe the exact right choice. We should have definitely still been working on ourselves outside of just the books we're consuming. And then to your point, Reid, I think um, well, I guess I'll build on your point that it connected to something I was saying earlier. But when the company more than doubles in size, what do you expect? Like, Reid's job is different than it was before. It'd be like you leaving one company and going to another company, but you have twice the people underneath you that you have to, get rowing in the same direction. And Nicole, like as you were saying, when you're launching an HR department, it's like, what do you expect to, to come out of that? Like, shouldn't there's going to be some turmoil? And so I think that really helped me with one of the things I started this year was one of my coaches is from the Tony Robbins program, and they talk a lot about about your if you have friction, it's probably because your blueprint is different than what reality is. And so blueprint meaning like, what is your expectation? If you were to imagine this, what did you expect? What was your blueprint for that? So how do you get your blueprint realigned with reality or your expectations? I thought that was really helpful because again, when I think of perspective about like systems break after 20% or like you double headcount, so your job is twice the job it used to be or what have you, that helped me like just, sort of maybe like not get as wrapped up emotionally as I was at different points. So hopefully that was somewhat coherent.
Yeah, made sense to me.
Well, how do we end on a high note then? It's a good share. 24?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I've got to also maintain my vulnerability here. But when we went to Boulder, and one of the parts of our annual planning and even quarterly planning is to review the 3-year picture, and so we talk about in an aspirational mindset, review point, what the business will look like. And I think Margaret's even asked us to close our eyes, and really like just in a way, let yourself dream a bit. And that's something I probably need to not do as much of, because I'm constantly kind of dreaming or aspiring, like for the company to go here, reach different heights or whatever. But when I saw everything we put there, my first reaction, I think I went straight to David, but I was like, this this is overwhelming. This is like too much. Like I didn't want to throw a wet blanket on it, but it's like, can we really do all this? And I don't know that you said it immediately, but you kind of were like, but look all at all that we have done. Like when you think about all that we've achieved, and I think that's one of the things Margaret did a good job of. It. She was like,
Mhm.
look at all that we achieved last year. So is this out of reach? Because I love thinking big and seeing big, but it truly made me nervous. Like I got anxiety instead of what I anticipated just being inspiration and energy. But then just in that moment with David, um, I started to feel better about it and think, man, we could do that, a lot
Mhm.
of that. And can you imagine if we achieved half of it?
Mhm.
Um, and we really have been doing that. So I'm not, this isn't necessarily a high note. I'm just acknowledging, like, when I think about the future, it's for me right now equally anxiety driving, as well as super excited and about what could happen.
Well, to put a or to help illustrate that, you guys know, like that we started um, EOS in 2020, and so early, just a couple months ago, I had pulled what was our original 3-year vision in 2020 for 2023, and when I just pulled it up to refresh myself, but the outcome of that is where we are today is 3 times the revenue that we had originally projected like when we did our first VTO. So I remember back then when we were putting this together, we thought it was outlandish and crazy. And then to do 3x of that now, it's like, what the heck? So then I totally understand why sometimes we will look at those, like the annual planning or the 3-year process and be like, well, that seems too crazy. But then when you actually get into it, it's the whole like you overestimate 1 year, underestimate 3 years or 10 years. And as you were saying, the spirit of vulnerability. One of the things I started sharing with you guys this year is I felt that I started to pull back my ambitions this year because I don't know why, but it just had started to get to me, and I started to start to really, um, yeah, just pull back like my ambition. And so looking at things like that help remind me to like you can still reach, and we thought we were reaching then, and we well surpassed it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, tying to that thread, there's been a few conversations I've had recently in my coffee chats, one specifically with Bailey that stands out to me, that now it's so cool to see people who have been here for that long. I think she's at 5 years, 4 years
Yeah,
maybe, 5 years.
5. Yeah.
And that, usually people are asking you, "Hey, can you have imagined this 5 years ago of where we are now?" And it's like, I'm asking them. I'm like, "Hey, you were here in 2018. Could you have imagined this when we were all sitting in its tiny little office, like back to back?" And so it's been kind of cool to like flip that question for people that have been here to see the growth. And most of the time it's like, no, like I could never have imagined this. Like, and so it's just that similar feeling that the three of us have, but now we're sharing with that. We're sharing with that feeling with more people.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's been a great 23. I'm very proud of the work we've done, and yet I'm still really excited for 24. Um, yeah, so many more new experiences, and I'm really excited about a lot of yeah, as you were saying, Reid, like the 4 departments that we launched to see what they do next year because it does take time to get settled and then really see them take off. So it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, we brought on some great talent, and there's I think the other part of growing this brand um, is more and more opportunity comes knocking instead of us like trying to identify or we're going to seek it out. It's like, which is super flattering. It's been awesome, and credit both of you. Obviously, David's been networking his tail off since we started the company, but yeah, I feel like every other week somebody's saying, "Hey, we want to do this," or "You open a partnering there," and that is going to really challenge us again in 24, and all that talent that's coming in is going to get exposed to that. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to that. I think right now they're rightfully looking back to us saying, okay, which of these doors are we going to open? We can't open all of them, but it'll be fascinating as they get more context, more understanding of the industry and the partners, how they see it. But definitely lots of opportunity next year.
Cool. Well, tune in 12 months from now to see if we got that T-Rex.
I'm counting on it. Be right next to Jack. Maybe take Jack's head off and put it inside the T-Rex's mouth.
So yeah, I like that. Poor Jack. All right, guys. Well, we'll till next time.